iTnews is hosting our State of Security Breakfast Roadshow 2026 in Melbourne on September 10, proudly sponsored by CoreView, Delinea and Huntress. Join us and executives from end-user organisations as we explore the key trends, challenges and opportunities identified in our State of Security 2026 report that are shaping Australia's cybersecurity landscape and operations. Attendance is complimentary for qualified end-user technology and security professionals. Follow the link in the description to register your interest or visit itnews.com.au. Hello and welcome to the IT News podcast. Our guest this fortnight is Associate Director for Hosting Infrastructure at the University of Southern Queensland, Stephen Payne. We've seen and written about a lot of customers affected by price hikes for their virtualisation software upon renewal. But this one's different because the university kicked off a strategic review of its virtualisation environment in late 2024, well ahead of its renewal, and has now replaced its hypervisor software for around 800 VMs supporting 100 applications. It is now looking ahead to a microsegmentation implementation, and outside of that, augmenting its hosting options with some Azure. It'd be useful if you can give me a bit of a sense of your role at the university and the hosting domain that you're involved in.
I am now the Associate Director of Hosting Infrastructure. Over time, this position has evolved to meet the requirements of the university. Our role in hosting infrastructure is to provide that foundational platform for applications, developers, the entire team basically at the university to build on. It comprises of looking after data centres. We have 2 data centres on our Toowoomba campus. It has a cloud element in that we have several SaaS solutions that we engage with, and we're somewhat responsible for some of that. And also we use Azure for our IaaS, infrastructure as a service type things. Very early days in that, but definitely very much on-premise. And we also look after that virtualization layer and then the operating system layer above that, and in many cases where there are VMs that need that managed.
You mentioned that the hosting infrastructure obviously supports the application estate and also the developers. Are you able to give me a ballpark of how many applications the hosting infrastructure is supporting and what the developer cohort looks like?
The key applications we have in our learning management system, which is based on Moodle, our staff and student portals, which is homegrown approach based on other packages, and we have PeopleSoft as well. But a ballpark figure across the board, there's probably about 100 or so applications that we look after, and our developers look after those at the application level, but also refine them for our requirements. So there's some bespoke things happening there to make sure that what we need is up to date for what our students need and our staff needs.
Are you able to give me a sense maybe of out of that environment that you've just described, out of the applications, etc., what portion of that was virtualized versus what portion maybe runs cloud native, either as SaaS or as something that you're doing with Azure, for example?
A very high percentage of our VMs are on-prem at the moment. They're hosted on our virtualization platform. I think it was about 95% of everything that we were running is virtualized now. There's a few appliances and subsequent peripheral things that we use that can't be virtualized. The infrastructure as a service, we have very little running there at the moment. We've got a few trials happening, I would say, but our main focus is on-premise. We have very good data centers at the moment that are worth the money that we're putting in them. We haven't really taken that next step of hybridizing too much or moving any of our workloads there. It also helps us with our cybersecurity stance as well. We can control things a lot better where we are, but there are plans to look at where it makes sense, have some sort of load balancing, burst out workloads in the cloud. But for this current situation, we're about 95% virtualized on-premise.
So I understand that around late 2024, there was a strategic review of the virtualization environment. Are you able to just talk a little bit about that? I can maybe kind of guess what might have triggered the review, and we might be able to talk around that.
Sure. So our incumbent solution is the same solution that a lot of other organizations use. We were very comfortable with it. There was a takeover of that particular product. And in 2024, we decided that we needed to look at what other alternatives were out there. Through the help of many good vendors and resellers, we got some very good information coming in. We dealt with Red Hat, looking at OpenShift Vert. We looked at Microsoft for Hyper-V and their products, and we looked at a few others, Proxmox and so on. The evaluations were based on, at the time, was what can we do that's like for like? We didn't want to uplift everything. We didn't want to change our skill sets. It was just a matter of getting from A to B without having too much of an investment to impede what we were trying to get done. So it was a process that probably lasted 6 months. And at the end of it, we came up with a rating system that had those products, and we came to a conclusion which led us to Nutanix.
2024 seems relatively early in the piece in terms of going down this path. Was this aligned with your renewal cycle, or was this proactively, you can see what might be coming down the track, down the line impact on the budget, and you thought, well, we have to at least evaluate what that looks like?
Yes, it's a bit of both. So firstly, the university's budget cycles are calendar year, and so we need to plan about a year in advance of what we're going to do for our spend for the next year. Along with that, we read the news, and a lot of that information was coming through saying, hey, look, a lot of organisations are experiencing some really large increases. We are a member of the Quarter in Australia, and part of that, they do a lot of group bargaining with the vendors. Something that also came up was Nutanix came through with a really good offering through Quarter, and that put a little bit of time pressure on us as well. We needed to have that all signed by a certain date to get the good pricing that we were after. But yes, we got in early. We started looking early because it was important to us to have a clear line to where we were going to be when our renewal came up. And our renewal was about April 2025. So we wanted to be well in front of that and looking at what we were going to be doing early. We're also lucky in that we are a small university and a small team, so we can be quite agile. We can adjust to things a lot quicker than probably some of the larger organisations can because of our approach.
And was there any challenge in mounting a business case for the transition? Because I imagine this is one of those technologies that you want to keep stable, that you want to keep running in the background for as long as possible. It's one of those things that maybe you don't want to touch.
That's absolutely correct. We didn't really want to touch anything at all. We wanted everything to be smooth sailing, particularly at that foundation layer of your virtualization. There was a couple of different things that happened there. So we had a restructure at the university, and we had some new positions put on. We had a director of operations come on who didn't want to see us just treading water for the next 5 years. He wanted us to be a bit more disruptive and look at how we might do things better. There were a few things that changed in the way that we delivered to students in our trimester approach and short course approach and those sort of things. So we essentially were changing our delivery model for our students at the same time as we were changing the way that we were managing things underneath. And so that also brought into clear light that we didn't want to do anything that was going to be disruptive above it, but certainly something that would give us much more flexibility below it, if that makes sense. At that point, we were on a path anyway. We could have probably continued on with the incumbent solution, and that may have been fine for another couple of years. Again, Quarter did some very good deals there and got some good pricing. But at that point, we were ready to jump off and look at what else we could do.
So you mentioned that one of the requirements, and I don't know whether this carried through the entire transition, was you were looking for like capability initially. Do you want to describe what that looked like, I guess, in terms of your operations?
Certainly. Like for us was deployment of VMs being very straightforward. We had templates, we had all of our playbooks and everything set up to do things a certain way, and we have compliance settings there. We wanted our monitoring to be pretty much the same as what it was before, and migrations and management of VMs, we didn't want to change too much there either, because that just meant upskilling that would add lead time to getting to the new solution. When we looked at Nutanix, there was a lot of like there for the incumbent, but there was also a lot of extra features that we were excited about. Some of the things that we haven't implemented yet, but certainly plan to do, are microsegmentation. We hadn't implemented that in the incumbent solution. We were on our path there, but we wanted that to be not like, but something that we could still do regardless of what product we put in. At the implementation stage, we still are managing things very much similarly to what we were before, but now we have this open door to be able to do a whole lot more.
In terms of the transition, how did you approach the actual movement of the VMs across from the incumbent to Nutanix? How did you approach that? How did you approach the cadence of that work?
We started planning that very early as well, looking at what we could migrate in hours, what we had to migrate out of hours, what was disruptive, what was non-disruptive, what things we were going to need to reassess when we migrated them. And then there were certain things that we just could not migrate that aren't currently supported on Nutanix. And we had to come up with some creative ideas there on how we would address that. It was a lot of planning. I have to shout out Nutanix Move. That is the feature that Nutanix offer as well. It's pretty much point and click, and it's migrating the machine as it needs to, and then has a final cutover, which is like a reboot of the VM once it's done. So we could stage a whole lot of migrations and then have those reboots out of hours if they were disruptive reboots. But for the most part, we also architect a lot of our systems and services to be redundant. So we could move the non-active nodes early, and then we could swing over to the active node when we needed to. But yes, there was certainly a lot of planning put into it and a lot of nights where we were hoping things would go well, and it all seemed to go well. We had a very short timeline there also because we were concerned that once we finalised our contract with the incumbent vendor, that there may be audits that would come through. So we were concerned we didn't want to have any trace of their product so that there would be some legality problems there. So we certainly wanted to make sure that we had everything done by a particular time.
Given the timelines that you mentioned before, I'm assuming there was somewhere around sort of 8 months or so in terms of when you started the initial review and evaluation to when you needed to be migrated off.
Yeah, so the evaluation was completed. We had a direction. We did a proof of concept. We had very good engagement with Nutanix and Lenovo. Lenovo, one of the key partners there. They came up with a smaller cluster for proof of concept. We ran that for a couple of months, moved a couple of workloads there, made sure everything was good and comfortable for us and the whole process. We engaged professional services with Nutanix as well, just to make sure that if there were any gaps in our knowledge or any, I like to call them alligators, things that come out of the woodwork that you didn't expect, we would be prepared to meet those. Because we're a 24/7 university, downtime is really not an option where we're concerned. So once the proof of concept was finished, it was really then just a matter of getting those migrations done over time. One of the most challenging parts of that was the Oracle databases. Oracle databases have a particular requirement with storage. We wanted to make sure that we had our redundancy there. We worked with Oracle, we worked with our database team and made sure that was all going to work well. Thankfully, we were successful across the board. 800 odd VMs migrated in about 6 months.
Another important point you mentioned there, I think Lenovo is the hardware partner. So in terms of you're running Lenovo gear with the Nutanix cloud platform, just trying to understand the architecture.
Lenovo is our hardware vendor in this regard. We're open to using others if we need to, but they were best bang for buck for us at the time. We run AHV, which is the virtualization layer for Nutanix on top of those.
And the other features that you talked about around microsegmentation, other things, are they within the broader Nutanix cloud platform?
Yeah, they're part of Nutanix cloud infrastructure. We purchased the ultimate offering, which has Flow, which is the microsegmentation. It evaluates what you have in your network at the time and it gives recommendations on where you should tighten up, those sort of things. We have firewalls, obviously, in our environment, but east-west is still a challenge for us. Host-based firewalls are hard to manage. So this is going to be a great next step for us using Flow.
And you mentioned that that was already on the roadmap previously. I guess the timing is adjusted with the transition, but it's still going ahead in terms of a microsegmentation implementation.
That's the expectation, yeah, that we will be trying to implement this by the end of the year. At the moment, the firewalls do a fantastic job. We're not looking to replace those. We're just trying to improve our cybersecurity posture there to make sure that we're covering all bases. It was definitely on the roadmap for. We were evaluating the incumbent solution and we were very ready to proceed there. We took a bit of a step back while we got everything migrated and settled in, and now we're keen to move forward again.
I know you mentioned this was like for like in terms of the ambition, but has there been any change in the underlying requirements of running the different virtualization platforms in terms of maybe the amount of hardware that's being used or some other aspect?
We actually reduced the amount of hardware that we were using, which was surprising at the time. One of the features of Nutanix Move is it actually gives you recommendations to right size before you migrate. So we were in the land of plenty, I guess you would call it, with our hardware deployment. We had 30 odd Dell servers that were running the incumbent virtualization platform. We never wanted for RAM, we never wanted for compute, and storage we were covered for as well. Then, of course, there's been more recent constrictions based on price for hardware as well. So our strategy now is to look at what we can eke out of what we have rather than looking to purchase more, and also looking at those cloud options as well. So the strategy is slightly changed underneath in that we don't now just we need to increase RAM or we need to increase CPU. We use the tool sets that are there to inform us as to whether that's a good idea and whether we need to do it at all.
I imagine there are other pressures as well in terms of people wanting to run research or power-hungry workloads on your infrastructure as well, which could benefit from freeing up some of that space.
That's true. We do have a lot of requests from researchers for particularly storage, but compute is at a premium now, and researchers need as much as they can get, obviously, GPU and such.
Were there any other results or any other kind of benefits you've seen from making that transition that perhaps were not in the original like-for-like transition business case or ambition that you wanted to share?
I think the main value add for us at this stage is a more dynamic future on it. We could do a lot of the things that we were doing on the incumbent with the new product, but there seems to be a focus from the Nutanix platform on, I have this need for this, here's the product, and it's not going to take you very long to get to where you want to be with it. And so from a direction point of view, for instance, we are looking at that hybrid cloud approach where it makes sense, and there's a product for that. I've seen it in action. It makes it look very easy to get that burst out DR workloads done. Prior to that, with the way that we were going, that wasn't obvious to us. It certainly wasn't something that we could perceive with the products we were using. We're working on NDB, which is the Nutanix database product as well. So I mentioned we have Oracle databases, we have Postgres, and we're looking at where we can leverage that product so that our return on investment on things like Oracle are much higher. At the moment, it's like for like where we were before, but we could be much more efficient if we could start using some of these things, and that's certainly on the roadmap for us as well.
Just as a start of the conversation, you mentioned some experiments or doing certain things in IaaS. Just wondering how you see that fitting or evolving the way that the university looks at its hosting environment.
So for us, as I alluded to, I guess we value high availability. So having that decentralized workload outside of our data centers, in the event that we do have some issue with our physical environment, it makes sense for us to have a secondary node, say, for some workloads, particularly those ones that we don't want to have any downtime on. That's certainly a direction that we would be looking at with the IaaS, and certainly using the NCI options there to make it happen. Things like burst out workloads is a big one for us as well. So we go through stages where accessing our university website might have a lot of traffic. Results release is a peak time for accessing certain systems. And because our students are obviously our most important customers, we want to make sure that their experience is up to scratch. And so we don't want any delays and latency.
There's an extra layer of assurance, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't see a future where we're all in cloud. I think at the most it would be a hybrid where it makes sense. But then the cloud strategy is also, if there is a SaaS solution that will work for us, we'll certainly investigate that.
Any final things you wanted to get across or you think we've missed?
I think the main thing for me is that the experience with all vendors actually has been very positive. We went into this expecting a lot of pushback or our product's better than yours. And at the end of the day, all of the vendors were keen to help a small university like us just as much as they might help a large university or a large organisation. It's been very good from that point of view because we feel as valued as any other customer. So it's been great for that.
Did it help that Cordit was involved or had a brokerage role or involvement within the actual vendor interaction initially? I imagine that they have some weight in terms of their position as a body representing the IT community within the tertiary sector.
Oh, absolutely. Cordit certainly helped out there. But what I will say, before we got to the pricing and the deals that Cordit were helping out with, Cordit also had a lot of those technical discussions that they put on at lunchtimes and so on, and we took advantage of those. But we have a really good account team at Nutanix also. Can't speak highly enough of how they identified that we were looking for something to solve a problem, but went above and beyond to run boot camps and workshops for us at no cost to us to make sure that we understood. And there was no expectation that we were going to use their product. And also the same for Red Hat as well. They put on quite a lot of work to see whether that was the right fit for us. Those interactions informed what we were going to do, but it also makes us feel comfortable with our selection going forward.
That's the episode for this fortnight. Stay tuned for the next episode. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news, head over to itnews.com.au.